Looks like we're having some individuals log on, which is good. We'll give them one more minute and then we'll dive right in. So that's good. Okay, well, it is 2:02, so I think we should get started so we don't waste any of Andy's time. I do want to introduce myself. My name is Madison, and I'm a marketing lead here at Enspire Partners. Thank you so much for Enspire for putting on this webcast today, and that is Confessions of a Data Engineer One Man's Journey. I'm very pleased to welcome our main presenter, Andy Rocha, the Director of Field Engineering at Databricks, and our President of Enspire Partners, Tony Ford. Now, before we move forward, I do want to give us a moment to review our confidentiality notice, and then we'll move on to the agenda to go over how today's webcast is going to be laid out. So I'll give a couple of minutes for you guys to read this notice, and then we'll go on and move ahead on. All righty, hopefully that was enough time. But a quick little overview of our agenda today. It'll last about 60 minutes for our webcast. We'll start with a little bit of a company overview and brief by Tony Ford about Enspire Partners, and then I'll turn it over to Andy to give us our amazing presentation today. And then we'll wrap it up with a 10-minute Q&A session or more if needed. Again, for the Q&A, if anyone has any questions, they can go ahead and put their questions in the Q&A little chat box in the Zoom dashboard as we go through our presentation. That way Andy can review them at the end. But feel free, if you have any that pop up during the presentation, to go ahead and type those out in the Q&A dashboard. But as I said, I'm going to hand it over to Tony for a couple of minutes to go over Enspire and to tell you a little bit about his company.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for joining us for this webinar on data engineering. I'm Tony Ford, President of Enspire Partners. Enspire provides staff augmentation and consultative services in 4 primary practice areas: enterprise applications, cybersecurity, custom development, and data engineering. We're a people business, and my job allows me to work with some very talented folks, like our presenter today, Andy Rocha. I've known Andy for more than 15 years. And he will share with you his story and some of the lessons learned along the way as he's progressed from an accountant to a business intelligence consultant, and now working as director at Databricks, one of the leading data engineering firms in the world. Andy, I'm so glad that you're presenting for us today. I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Maddie. Let me, if that's okay, I will steal your screen, Maddie, and share it, and I'll take it over from there.
Perfect. And then when you're all finished up, I'll take it back over. So steal the show, Andy.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, guys. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. As Tony and Maddie mentioned, my name is Andy Rocha, and I'm a director in the field engineering organization here at Databricks. I will talk a little bit about Databricks at the end of my time here. But before we get there, my goal here today is just to talk a little bit about my journey from like Tony mentioned, an accountant, a business user, a technology consumer, I guess I would put it, to my road today, and how I got there, and what I've learned on that journey in terms of the world of data engineering and really data analysis and analytics in general, and where I believe things are going from now on. It's a very dynamic space. If you watch the news or are in the internet at all, you know that this is an ever-changing world that we live in terms of technology and data specifically. So super exciting stuff, and I'll share with you guys a little bit of my thoughts and ideas about it. So let me start by mentioning a little bit of my journey, just to get into a little bit more detail into my journey as a professional. So as Tony mentioned, my first real professional job was as an accountant. I was a staff accountant at a consulting firm where Tony also worked at. And so, as I mentioned, I was just a consumer of technology. I was the end business user of many different applications, specifically some ERP systems that I used to manage my piece of our finance finance team at that company. Through a little bit of hard work and a lot of luck, I was able to pivot my career at that company and join the consulting branch of that company. So going from an internal resource to an external consultant, and specifically in the data warehousing and business intelligence, or BI, practice. Had to learn a lot, but it was a great, like I said, a great pivot in my career, and a fundamental change in the way my career was progressing, because today, all that I do today started back then as a BI and data warehousing consultant. Worked with several different technologies, specifically Oracle related technologies at the time, but it was a great start on this technology career. Did that for a few years, and eventually decided to move towards the product side of the house. Went to work as a product manager for a company that was designing their own analytics product, as a company that dealt in the security business, and they built software for the security companies, and they were building a reporting engine on top of their product for their customers. So did that for a while. And when I made that change, I was very happy there. But I think we all have in our heads that idea of, hey, if there are 2 or 3 companies that if they call, or people that if they call, I definitely will answer. And sure enough, after I was there for a while, one of those companies that I was always a dream of mine to work for called. And so I decided to go back into consulting, back into the Oracle world, BI and data warehousing. Learned a ton there, became a much more confident and professional, and my experience from a technology perspective was broadened quite a bit, and mostly because I was stretched quite a bit in the job, which was very good. Did that for a while, and eventually decided that I needed to learn something different. So I decided to move to the pre-sale side of the house. So all my experience in consulting and customer facing roles up to that point had been post-sales, so mostly as a consultant and as a consulting leader. But I thought that I needed to move to the dark side, if you will, to the other side of the decision process, which is to pre-sales. So worked as a pre-sales architect, as a technology pre-sales resource for a consulting firm. Enjoyed quite a bit. Loved that side of the work. Just having to understand a little better how customers think before making a decision, what's valuable to them, and how it's not all about the technology. The technology is just half of the job, but there's a big part of the job is being customer obsessed and really listening to your customers' needs and making sure that their needs are being addressed. Otherwise, they won't make a decision in your favor. And I think all these things put together brought me to my role today. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a director of field engineering at Databricks. And the interesting thing about field engineering is that at our company, at least, is that it brings all these things together. We have to be customer focused or end user focused to understand, because those are the people that are going to be using our platform and using our products. So we really need to understand their needs. There's a sales aspect to it, right? We are, just like many other companies out there, are trying to win business every day. So we need to be good listeners and come up with the right solutions for customers to truly believe and understand that Databricks is the right solution for them. And there's also an implementation and customer success type of aspect to the job, because this product is only valuable to these customers when they're able to implement it successfully and run in production successfully. So we need to make sure that they are enabled and supported in a way that they can get there in the quickest, most efficient and successful way possible. So I feel very blessed and lucky with the career that I had so far, and really excited about what's next. And before I talk a little bit more about what's next, I want to roll time way back for a minute, if that's okay. I'm going to kind of give you my perspective on the history of data, if you will. First, the universe came into existence, and then the dinosaurs disappear somehow. And then us humans, we started collecting data. And I know I'm being a little silly with all these images right now, but the reality is that since really prehistoric times, if you think about it, we as a species were already collecting data, right? Men and women drawing on caves, on the walls of caves. And obviously that's a lot different now. We do it through our smart devices and sensors and cameras and so on. But in essence, we are doing the same thing. We are collecting data, or at least putting data that it's in our brains somewhere that we can consume later, right? Now, collecting data is almost based on what I just said. Collecting data, in my opinion, is almost instinctive to us, right? It's almost an instinct, but that's only half of the instinct, really. The other half of it is that once we collect it, once we have it, we want a way to, we desire a way to organize it and make sense of it. Just accumulating a ton of data can be fun, but if we translate this whole thought to the business world, it's collecting data in itself is not very useful, right? What is really valuable in it is interpreting it, finding patterns and finding trends and making sense of it. Our brains themselves are wired in a way to find patterns. Children, when they're growing up, that's how they learn many different things, including even language, right? They try to find patterns in what they're observing, and that's how they learn. So we as humans are wired to look for patterns and trends. If we take all this idea and we kind of try to look forward and move forward towards business data collection and what that looks like, there are a few patterns and phases, I guess I would call it, in this journey from the early days of data collection and analysis to where we are today. And I try to, at a very high level, break these down into three big buckets. The first one is I like to call transactional data collection. Initially, collecting data was 100% a manual and mechanical process, but it's been around for a long time. Think punch cards and things like that, right? Way back when you went to a library, let's say, to check out a book. If those of you that are as old as I am, you remember going to a library, and the book had a little card inside of it where you wrote your name and the date that you checked it out, and when you brought it back, the librarian would write down the day you checked their book back in. That in itself is data collection, right? It was very manual, like I said, and mechanical, but it was data collection in itself. And retrieving that data was also very mechanical and manual. It was very costly, right? You retrieve one record at a time. So if you wanted to know how many times a book or a type of book got checked out, you had to go find that book or the books that make up the collection and look at every single card and write it down somewhere. It was a very time-consuming, mechanical, error-prone process, but it was in itself data collection and data retrieval, right? Eventually, as technology progressed, and especially the area of technology as we know today that came through the personal computer, eventually through all that evolution and the technology progress, companies started to wonder how they could identify patterns and trends in that data they've been collecting. At that point, most organizations were no longer writing things down on paper, right? They were using different software to store data and to collect data, and they started to wonder how they could use that, how they could make better use of that, as opposed to going one by one records like we were doing it before. So this is how data warehouses came about. Data warehouses are platforms that allow you to easily collect, but also aggregate and organize data in a way that helped answer very quickly a lot of questions that businesses were asking at the time. So instead of going one card at a time, one book at a time, you could collect all the history of books being checked out and checked in for all your library in one place, and then just ask a question using some programming language of some sort, mostly SQL, but there are other flavors out there as well. But using a programming language, you could ask a question to the database, to the data warehouse, if you will, and that answer would come very quickly without you having to walk through the whole library looking at cards. It revolutionized really the way we understood data and the way we analyzed data and the way we looked at trends and patterns that I was describing. The only catch for that is that at that time, like I said, that retrieval happened through a programming language. So if I am an accountant, going back to my experience, if I am an accountant but I don't know how to write SQL or Python or another programming language, I would need a developer sitting next to me who could do that. that could ask the question to this data warehouse in the language that the data warehouse understands, right? Because it doesn't understand plain English or any other language. So, so this is the need for business users like accountants like me to answer those questions themselves and get the results they need generated, what we call today business intelligence or BI. Business intelligence platforms were set on top of data warehouses and were a way for business users to have a visual or no code way of asking questions and analyzing data on the fly. The whole thing that we call I think we call it slicing and dicing data. That ability for the end users to do that on the fly and ask a question and get an answer, and based on that answer, modify their query or their question a little bit to get a different answer. That generated this world of business intelligence. And data warehousing, again, the way to store the data and aggregate it and organize very quickly. With business intelligence, the way to reach that allows business users to retrieve that data quickly and easily. That combination was very powerful, and for decades it was the de facto way to collect, store, and retrieve data. In the last 10 or 15 or so years, there was the third, I guess, revolution, if you will, or the third bucket of the history of data analysis, in my opinion, which was the world of the data lake plus big data. As storage, the cost of storing data, so storage costs dropped, and this over time, and this has we need to say a big thanks to public cloud storage for that. So by public cloud, I mean AWS and Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud platforms. Those companies, when they started offering cloud storage for individuals and for companies, it came at a very low cost. So instead of us having those server rooms in our offices, that room there you open a door and it's very loud in there, very cold, and there are machines chugging all day, you didn't need to have that anymore. You could store all your data in the cloud, and it came at a very cheap storage cost. What that did, it allowed companies, especially, and individuals as well, but mostly companies, to start keep storing and keeping data that up until that point they weren't storing because it was very expensive to do so. So instead of just storing tables of rows and columns, any other types of files like log files and images and videos, companies started keeping those things because at that point it was very cheap to do so. Even though they didn't know what they were going to do with those at that point, just keeping that data and storing it, it was a no-brainer because it was so cheap now to do so. At some point, those same companies started looking at that, thinking, and by the way, sorry, this ability to store different types of files of different formats and not just tables in a data warehouse in just a bucket of storage, we call that a data lake. So folks started to store all different types of data, all different types of files just in a big cloud storage bucket that we call the data lake. Basically a compilation of all the different data that as an organization or an individual you started to compile. At some point, when you start storing a bunch of data, we as humans want to make sense of it again, right? So these companies started thinking, boy, we have all this data now. It's easy and cheap for us to store it, but how can we get how can we get any use from it? Data warehouses weren't the answer at that point, because data warehouses expect structured data that's very clean in a certain format, of a certain type, that these new files like videos and images and logs didn't fit. So in order to be able to analyze this new data that we were now storing, we had to come up with new processes and systems. And this is where the term big data comes from. Big data is just a way of identifying data that's of multiple types and in large volumes. Data warehousing are very good and very efficient, but they also have limitations in terms of how much data they can compute in terms of the amount of data. Data lakes store a very, very, very large amount of data, and a lot of times. So we needed tools that not only could chug through more data, but also different types of data. So the first tools that were developed to do that, the first really impactful tool, I will put it that way, that was designed for that was called Hadoop. It's just a distributed system that allows you to run multiple queries in multiple machines at one time. And in doing so, it can compute through a lot of data large amount of data and volume of data very fast. But eventually there was an evolution in those platforms as well. Spark became at one point the most efficient and cheapest way to do so. And Delta is the latest, is now the gold standard of distributed computing or big data computing. And it has become the most used one by folks that want to, data engineers that want to compute a lot of large volumes of data and analyze large volumes of data very fast and very cheap. It's an open source product as well. The Databricks, my company, we offer a managed version of it. The creators of Delta, by the way, are the founders of Databricks, but we also offer an open source no, we don't offer, but there is an open source project for Delta out there, which means that anybody can use Delta for free if you just download it and maintain it yourself. So obviously, I left a lot of detail out of these big buckets, but if I wanted to look at it from a 30,000-foot view, this is where I would classify the evolution of data collection and analysis up to where we are today. Now, there's the big elephant in the room that I didn't mention here, and the news recently made it even more top of mind for all of us, which is AI. AI is not something new. It's been around for a long time. Companies have been using it for a long time, but a lot of the things that are happening in these recent days in the news, especially in regards to ChatGPT. We don't have time here today to talk about what ChatGPT is, but if you're curious, just go and Google ChatGPT after the session is over, and you're going to get a ton of information there of what it is and how you can use it. But the idea is that the idea of ChatGPT is basically using artificial intelligence to provide value conversations to a human on the other side. Every time we go towards these type of conversations, if you're a bit of a nerd like me, our minds go back to old sci-fi movies like 2001: Space Odyssey or The Terminator, where the whole idea is that robots or artificial intelligence is going to come to take our jobs or worse. But the reality is that as I see it today, AI is not coming to take our jobs. Somebody using AI will become more efficient and more successful at what they do, and will make themselves more valuable for any organization out there. So my encouragement here with this slide is not my goal, rather, is not to cause fear, is to create an encouragement that for anybody here watching, that if you haven't spent some time educating yourself in artificial intelligence, what their world looks like today and how to get started, I deeply encourage you to do so, because this is a one-way road. AI is something that will be prevalent in everything that we do. We see it today, right, with the cars that we drive and the software in our laptops that we use. And this is starting to become a reality, even in assembly lines in manufacturing companies, or the way that retailers decide what they're going to sell and when. AI is present in all of that today. So even if you're not working directly with technology, your company, your industry is being already affected by AI, and this will become more and more so in the future. That said, not everybody is at the same place today in terms of their AI usage, and I try to bring something here that I call the data maturity curve. On the left-hand side, in the world of, I'm not going to call the old world of data warehousing and BI, because that world is still very real and there's still a value. But in our middle bucket, if you will, of the evolution of data analytics, the data warehousing BI world is still something that every organization, most organizations rather, still use today and still have today. And like I said, there's still value for it. The only thing is that data stored in data warehouses and business intelligence dashboards and platforms, all they are doing is looking at what happened, right? How much did I sell yesterday? How much did I sell last quarter? How much inventory did I move from store A to store B last month? You're basically reporting the news, right? You're looking backwards and trying to find patterns and find trends that maybe will help educate you and your organization into what you should be doing tomorrow. But still very valuable, especially when you're talking about finance and accounting. You definitely need to and even sales, right? You need to look at what happened yesterday. You need to find out what happened in the past. Very valuable tools. But what folks are doing now using data lakes and technologies like Delta, as I mentioned, is using AI to try to predict what will happen, right? To be very accurate with your machine learning, your artificial intelligence predictions. You have to look at very large amounts of data. So data lakes and technologies like Delta are perfect for machine learning and AI. And a lot of companies are using that today already. And what they want to do is, like I said, predict what is going to happen based on what happened in the past. So what are my customers likely to buy tomorrow? How much inventory do I need to move from store A to store B based on the recent or historical trends of demand in that store and things like that? This companies that want to gain an extra competitive advantage today, they are using AI to look into the future and be more efficient with the way that they use their resources. Very cool, interesting stuff. Perfect example here is Amazon. I'm sure first time you logged into Amazon in your life and you went and you looked at an item, there was that message at the bottom saying, folks that looked at that item also wanted to look at these items. This is a very almost dumb way of looking at AI, but it is in fact artificial intelligence. What Amazon is doing is looking at the patterns for folks that looked at that item you're just looking at and other things they've bought or related things or based on the image for that item, other items that may look similar, and they are recommending those at the bottom for you. It's very dumb and simple AI, but it is in fact AI, and it just gets more complicated, more sophisticated from there. But the point of this slide, though, as you guys can see, is that I have this divide in the middle. And the reason here is that in many organizations, the data teams that work in these two worlds, if you will, they're segregated. In the data warehouse and BI world, a lot of times folks are still using on-premises servers with software that they have to install and download and install and maintain and upgrade and so on. Still works, it's still there, but it's sitting in your server room in your office, like I said. Folks that are working on the data lake side of the house, a lot of times, like I mentioned earlier, are probably making use of cloud or public cloud storage and open source format type of platforms like Delta to analyze this data. And those got brought into your organization at different times. They're managed by different people. They're looking at different places to get data. And this operating model of having these two separate silos, if you will, is very expensive, both from a time perspective and money perspective. You need more resources. Things don't match. I don't know about you guys, but I've been in meetings before where we sit in a room and somebody asks, what was our revenue last month? And two people in the room both have revenue numbers and they're both different. That's all caused because those folks were looking at different data sources to get their numbers. And this type of model that we have here on the screen causes that. And believe it or not, I work with customers every day on their data journey and what their plans are and helping them adapt their architecture to the world they want to live in. And I see this all the time. This is very common. We try to help customers move away from this and break these silos and become one, have this curve become one continuous flow. But this is a reality. And if you feel like your organization has to deal with this today, don't despair. There is a solution, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about next. We at Databricks believe that the future, or the best way rather, I won't say the future because it's the present, but the best way to solve this problem on the screen right here is with what we call data lakehouse. And the play on words there is on purpose, because the data lakehouse, we believe, combines the best of the data lake that allows for artificial intelligence, machine learning models to be developed and utilized, but also keeps all the value of the data warehouses and BI platforms have brought for us for several decades now, right? That the ease of use for business users and the way to store and aggregate data in an organized way and for quick retrieval. So all those things, there's still value there, but we want to combine those two to make sure your data plans and your data journey is the most efficient and easy and successful as possible. So a couple of things I want to point at here. In this data lakehouse platform, all your data is stored in the public cloud, in a cloud data lake. You don't have to have some data in the cloud and some data on premises. Two teams maintaining two different things and figuring out how to keep those things in sync. All that is eliminated. You get the best of both worlds. You're storing your data in one place. There are the obvious savings there, which is you're saving in storage costs, right? You're now not storing your data in two or more places. You're storing all your data in one place. But there's also the savings in terms of less resources required to maintain all that, and just making sure that your staff, your IT staff, is happier by using forward-looking technology and not having to deal with the nuisance of having to match data in two places, keep things synced, and so on. So lots of advantages in maintaining your cloud all in one place. Not only that, the next thing is the data governance aspect. At Databricks, we have a data governance platform that we call Unity Catalog. It's a way for you to manage and create access policies across all your data, across your whole data lake. If we go back to the model where you have data sitting in different places, you have to replicate that governance model everywhere. It's very hard to it's hard to implement, first of all, but then very hard to maintain, very error prone, because it's a lot of manual work. So keeping all your data in one place with one governance model, so you can make sure your access permissions are correct and they're easy to manage, is also very important. And from there on out, there are several different tools that can sit on top of your data lake, or your Delta Lake, as we call it here, that will be accessible and useful for all the different types of users. So for those business intelligence users, they still have the ability to use SQL or use a drag and drop tool to, like a lot of the big vendors we have out there, like Tableau or Power BI or others, drag and drop dashboarding tools to access the data in a very easy slice and dice type of way. It allows your data engineers to be more efficient by using workflows, so ways to combine data engineering pipelines together, but also make use of streaming. Well, we all know how important having fresh data is these days. I remember when I first started in my data warehousing career several years ago, like I described, most of our customers would be okay with just having data that was 1 day old. They would refresh their data or refresh their data engineering pipelines once a day. That is very rarely now acceptable to anybody. When we go and talk to customers now, at a maximum, they're trying to refresh their data once an hour, once every couple hours, but a lot of them want real-time data, or what we call micro batching, which is refreshing that data every few seconds. And you can see how that's important, right? Going back to my Amazon example, my user interface on the Amazon site needs to know right away what is the item that I clicked on, so it can make the recommendations. It needs to do that in real time. So, that's I know that's a very specific example, but a lot of this is very valuable information, or very valuable a way of approaching data retrieval for not only for a company like Amazon, but for a lot of different companies in a lot of different industries as well. And lastly, last thing I'm going to say is that if your company is thinking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, like I talked about, you most likely will have a team of data scientists in your organization, and they also will be able to access that same data sitting in the same public cloud that all the other personas will be doing as well. One platform, less to maintain, less to store, reduces costs, reduces time investment, reduces risk, because you have only one governance methodology being applied, and allow all these different folks to consume from the same place and collaborate. It promotes collaboration, allows them to all work together. Be glad to talk a little more about this solution or anything else offline later. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn if needed. But at this point, this is what I had for us today. Maddie, I'll let you steal the screen back from me and take it from here.
Thank you. That was amazing and very informative. I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know, Andy, when you can see it. That way I know everyone can see the right thing. Okay. Perfect. Thank you again, Andy. We're going to do a few follow-up items before we move into our Q&A section of our webcast, but I do want to remind everyone that if you do have any questions for Andy for our Q&A section, you can go ahead and put those in the Q&A dashboard. And Andy will start looking at those and get your answers ready, and then we can go over those. But right now, I do want to let you guys know that Enspire really loves to keep in contact with you guys, especially after we do one-on-one meetings like this. And we do regularly post information and follow-ups, as well as future registration for future webcasts that we have. So that's really important. I'm also going in our chat to paste our website for our YouTube channel. So you guys can go and look at our past webcast, and we're going to post this one as well on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and subscribe if you want to, look back at what was talked about today or really clue into what Andy talked about. We'd really appreciate that. Another fun thing we like to do is we like to have little surveys at the end to really gather your thoughts about what we talked about today. And you will be in a raffle to win a $25 Amazon gift card, which is always really fun. So I'm going to give you guys a minute to answer a few questions from the survey. And the link is in the chat for anyone who is looking for it. And if you don't get it, you can send me a quick little message. And then we'll go on to our Q&A for the end of the webcast. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to go ahead and do those.
And Maddie, I'll just add that for whoever wins this $25 Amazon gift card, when they go to use that card, they should look at the recommendations at the bottom and remember that was all done with AI. So
see, it's all connected, Andy. That was the point of this, just circling back around. Yes. Who doesn't love to win a fun little prize at the end of a webcast? That's a little thank you for sticking around this long. And if you guys don't have time right now, or in the car or doing something active, the survey link will be attached to our follow-up email that we will send later today or at the end of this week. So don't rush. And then we will be picking a winner later this week. So we will inform the winner when we have one. But I'm going to check the Q&A section really quickly. See, we have a few questions coming through, which is good. We'll give everyone a few minutes. I want to make sure everyone's links are working. Alrighty. Well, let's move on to the Q&A part of our webcast. Again, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A section. But our first question, Andy, this is for you, and it comes from Kim. And she would like to know, what are the latest changes in data management and reporting that all companies should be paying attention to? Do you have an answer for that one?
Yeah, I think, that's very relevant with the last piece of my presentation is, it's easy to think that machine learning and artificial intelligence, those are things for companies like Facebook or Twitter or Apple or Amazon. But this is something that in my experience, I see spreading in every industry. Last year I covered at Databricks, I covered our health and life sciences industry, and a lot of what we did in terms of machine learning was around prediction of need for medication and vaccines for COVID. So very real life, real world scenario where a lot of companies, a lot of the manufacturers of vaccines were using AI and machine learning to determine how much they needed to make and where you needed to go and how to track. There was a lot of concerns around the temperature of the vaccines. They had to stay at a certain temperature. So tracking real time the temperature of the trucks that were taking these vaccines to different places, all these things, very real life example where AI and machine learning and real time data was being used. This year, I'm working with our retail customers, and I see the same thing. I mentioned a few minutes ago, working with large retailers where they're trying to manage their inventory levels and find out how fresh the food in their fresh food department in the stores are and how long it's been there and what is the temperature of those freezers and so on. Things that used to be done with a person going there and measuring it, very time intensive, effort intensive, time consuming, error prone. Now it's all being done via streaming real-time data and the prediction of, okay, this is what we know today, but what should we expect to happen tomorrow? It's all being done via machine learning models and AI. So if you haven't spent any time looking at where the AI world is today, besides the little cute robots that we see on TV, how it's being used in the real world, in the industry that you're at, I would recommend go spend some time. There is no going back. This is where the future is going, and it's a great future. I'm excited about it because I think we're all going to be. What's gonna happen, in my opinion, with this is that it's not going to cause any of us to lose our jobs. It's just going to cause us to use our time in more useful ways, as opposed to being done mundane, repeatable work. The machine is going to do that, and we're going to be able to be more creative with our time.
Very nice. Thank you, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question from Brooke, and she wonders if things are working just fine the way they are, why should I consider a long and potentially extensive data modernization project for my company right now?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? The good old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? There's something to be said about that. But I think there are two things for me. One is, again, chances are, if you've been doing the same thing for the last 5 or 10 years, you're already doing something that in 5 or 10 years may be dead. And that's the reality of how technology moves today. I mentioned in my presentation that Hadoop was, for a long time, the gold standard of big data processing. It was the best thing we had, and it was very good. But it only took 5 or 10 years for something better to come. So whatever you're doing today, or whatever you were doing 5 or 10 years ago, there's a good chance in a year or in 10 years you will be dead. Let me rephrase that there will be something much better out there for you. So you should always be evaluating. You should always be evaluating where you are in your data and technology journey, and doing research about what else is out there and what could make you better. But the second biggest thing for me, the second thing for me, and maybe the biggest thing, is that with each advancement in platforms and systems and processes that we see, the costs tend to go down. So going back to one example that I used, we used to have, when Tony and I worked together in the office where we worked, we had this big server room, as I mentioned, that were just big machines that kept running all day, making a lot of noise. They broke all the time. There was a person that their full-time job was to make sure that stuff was running. It's very costly and very downtime prone. When the public cloud came and AWS said, all right, I'll just take all this for you. You just send me a check every month. I'll make sure that it's always running, that it's cheap, and that you can use as much as you want. The cost of storing data decreased by a bunch. And that's why we moved towards this data lake, big data world that we live in today. So point being is that whatever is new out there, there's a good chance that new thing will save you money. So going through a project like Brooke asked, going to another implementation product of adopting a new platform, adopting a new tool, educating your users on how to use it, figuring out how to maintain all of that. Of course, there's a cost associated with that, and there's change management associated with that. However, in the long term, your people will be happier. They will be more efficient because their jobs are going to be easier than they were before. And in the long term, you will save your money. It might take a year for you to get the money back. It might take 3 years. It all depends, obviously, on what you're trying to do and what you're looking to adopt. But you will be cheaper. But most effectively, if you make your people happier, you allow them to be more creative, and you open more opportunities for you to gain more competitive advantage in your industry in the future as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. Is there anything else you want to add or you think is important to finish the conversation off about data engineering?
Yeah, maybe a couple of things. Like I said a minute ago, if there are other questions, more broad questions about this topic or about my career so far, or about Databricks, about what we do at Databricks, please feel free to find me at I'm going
to put your email in the chat. That's what I'm pulling up for everyone, because I was like, I think that'd be
important.
By the way,
it's very easy. It's just my last name, Rocha, ROCHA @databricks.com. So feel free to reach out or find me on LinkedIn. That's fine as well. But the other thing, the last thing I'll leave here is what I said just a second ago is this world of data management and data analysis moves so fast now that every 5 years there's something new and better. So make sure you, if you're a nerd like me, that there's always a lot to learn and a lot to explore. But if you're just somebody who is trying to make sure that your manufacturing company is running efficiently, there's always tons of alternatives of how you can do today a little better. And yeah, just lots to explore. And machine learning, again, as I said a few times already, is the latest frontier, I guess. Not the last frontier, but definitely the latest.
Yes, that sounds good. Well, thank you for taking your time today to help inspire and to spread the message about data engineering. We really appreciate your time. I am going, of course, in the chat right now. I just sent a message, and it does have Tony Ford, the president of Enspire's, email and phone number if you guys want to have any extended conversation, as well as Andy's email. If you guys have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Andy, as he said. And like I did say earlier, that we will be picking a winner for the Amazon gift card raffle, and we will be reaching out soon. So check out your emails and make sure you're looking out. And we do really appreciate your time today, sticking with Enspire and really learning with us, and I really appreciate your time. So we hope in the future you guys come to our next webcast, and I can't thank Andy enough for giving our time today. And is there anything else you want to say, Andy?
No, thank you for the time. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, all right, everyone. I hope you guys have a great day. We'll be posting this on our YouTube channel, so copy that link in the chat and be sure to look out there for the rest of the week if you have anything else you want to see. And we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you again, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.